Okay. So, border crossings. I wanted to talk a little bit about them because before we left, I couldn't find a whole lot of information. Everything seemed really scary and dramatic dealing with border crossings. So, I thought I'd give you kind of what we've learned, the general process, and just share some tips with you. So first, the general process. When you're entering a country, you need to be checked out of the country that you're leaving. To exit a country, you get stamped out, meaning you get stamps in your passport saying that you're leaving the country. And then if you have a vehicle like we do, you also need to cancel your temporary import permit. Those are the two main steps. And then you go to the next country and you enter. So you get entry stamps in your passport, and you also need to get a temporary import permit for your vehicle. Now, all borders have their own intricacies, and we'll talk a little bit about those in a bit. But one tip that I have when you're doing the general process of border crossings is have all of your documents in one place. I got this before we left, just off of Amazon. I'll put a link to that below. But you can get them at, Office Max or Walmart or whatever. So I keep in here all of our important documents, the title and registration for Goose. I also have copies of everything, so copies of the title and registration, copies of our passports, copies of our driver's license, copies of our yellow fever cards, and I also have information on our vaccines in here. So yeah, just super helpful to have this, all your documents in one place. Footnote, be super careful with your originals. We usually double check our file to make sure we have all of our originals after handing copies and originals and everything over and dealing with that. So just before you leave the border, make sure you have everything that you need in your pack. Some borders do have fees, so do your research. Again, iOverlander is a great tool for that. In the dozens of border crossings we have done, we have not paid a bribe or even been asked for a bribe. So all these countries are really trying to crack down on the corruption, and there's a lot of times they have signs saying call this number if something happens for you. But like I said, we've had no issues, so I don't think that's a big concern. If you're doing your research, you probably will know if there are fees, how much they should be. Sometimes there's a fumigation that you have to pay for as you're crossing into a new country, that sort of thing. So there could be little fees that you might not know of ahead of time unless you're doing your research. In Central America, we encountered a lot of times where I have all of my copies, so they want to usually keep a copy of your passport and a copy of the title and a copy of the registration, so I have those all ready to give them. And then they stamp your passport to enter the country, and they want a copy of the page with the entry stamp, which I obviously can't have ahead of time. So they always have a copy shop that's, a block away or in the building, and it always costs too much, but you can walk and get a copy of that specific page. So in Central America, that's one thing that we found, that no matter how many copies I had prepared ahead of time, there always seemed to be one or two that they needed you to get at the border after you've had a stamp or something like that. But the process in general is still the same. Another footnote, all border crossings are different, but sometimes you need insurance, sometimes you can't take certain foods across a border, sometimes you might even need a visa. So do your research. You can usually look and read people's accounts of what you need and what the steps are, maybe where the buildings are. For South America, really we haven't needed any copies. They don't really ask for copies. They might make their own copies, but they have restrictions on food. There's certain types of food that you can't bring across the border either way, like meats and cheeses and that sort of thing. They have a full list, so do your research, and either you'll be throwing away a bunch of stuff at the border, or maybe, hopefully, you've eaten it all before you get there. Visas are another thing to keep in mind. Some countries you might need a visa for, depending on where you're from and what the country's rules are at the time. So for us, we only had two countries that we needed visas for, Bolivia and Paraguay. So just do your research ahead of time and know what documents you might need if there is a visa required to enter that country. For vaccines, I think the only one we've been asked for on this trip is yellow fever. We did have a couple other ones. We went to a travel doctor basically and told them where we would be going, and they were able to advise us on what we need and what we probably should have, and so that's something that you can do before you travel. But like I said, I think the yellow fever was the only one that we actually needed to show at a border. One thing I would highly recommend, get to the border early, because you never know how long it's going to take, and most of these countries, especially little border crossings, they take a siesta, which they're not very timely on getting back. So it can take up most of your afternoon if you get there too late, and once you're on the other side, you don't know how long that side of the border is going to take and where you're going to end up for the night. So to me, getting to the border, getting through it, and having extra time on the other side of that is really helpful and just less stressful. And last but not least is patience. Make sure you go into every border with a good bit of patience, because you never know what's going to happen. We've gone to borders that people have told us, oh, it was so quick and easy, it took 5 minutes, and it took us 6 hours. So you never know what to expect. So no expectations, have a lot of patience, go in with a good attitude, and you'll just notice that you get generally treated a lot better when you're smiling. The Florida Gator. And just share some I can't say it. And just share some I can't say it.